cassette series was recorded outdoors.
Love is a decision. If you're watching me with a notebook, which I hope you are, I hope now you'll write down in big, bold print, underline, circle, and color if necessary. But please make sure you emphasize it. Love is a decision. Many people have made marriage encounter weekends or engaged in couples weekends. And that's the thing that's going to take you more than a weekend to learn. Millions of people across the world have spent weekends as couples and as engaged couples and as married couples on these encounter weekends, as we call them. Marriage encounter, M-E or E-E. Now, the first thing you have to really grasp about this, it's not just a slogan, I want you to sink it into your mind. Love is a decision, not a feeling. Why do I stress that so much? Why do the encounter weekend stress that so much? Because we've grown up believing that love was a feeling. Well, there is that kind of love, but that's not the kind of love we're talking about. That kind of love that is a feeling is more liking somebody. But the kind of love that Christ talks about, and the kind of love that marriage is all about, is not a feeling, it's a decision. And another slogan you can write down is that feelings have no morality. I'll repeat it again. This is probably harder to grasp than the first one. Feelings have no morality. Now what does that mean? It means I can't sin with a feeling. Feelings are indifferent. Oh, I can have bad feelings, and I can have good feelings, but they're not necessarily sinful, you see. And that's something we don't understand, because we've grown up since we were little children being told that's wrong. A little baby starts crying. Mama says, what's wrong with you? And the kid says, I don't feel good. Well, you've no right to feel bad. What's wrong with you? Well, you see, you can't help feeling bad. You can't help feeling depressed. You can't help feeling tired. You can't help feeling thirsty or hungry. They're feelings. They're indifferent. Right now, I feel hot. You know, you can feel hot or feel cold. These are all feelings. There's no morality to them. Sometimes people feel angry. You can even feel sexy. And believe it or not, it's not a sin. You either feel it or you don't feel it. Some people shouldn't feel sexy, they feel, because they're not married, and they do. And there's a lot of married people who should feel sexy or not. But either way, it's not a sin. Feelings have no morality. Now when we're little, of course, we've grown up thinking when we felt good, we were good, and then God loved us. And if we felt bad, then we were bad, and God didn't love us, and that's wrong. Let me use it, first of all, perhaps, from the point of view of prayer. If you went to the church to pray, and you said, I'm going to spend a half an hour with God, and I'm going to spend half an hour praying, or reading the Bible, reading a prayer book, just talking to God in church. And after 5 minutes, you felt not a thing. Didn't feel God's presence. Didn't feel like He was there. Didn't feel like anyone was listening. All you felt was distraction. And if I asked you how you felt, you said, I feel tired. I feel depressed. I feel hung up. I don't feel anything here. I think this is a waste of time. I'm leaving. But you didn't leave. You stayed on trying. You said, well, I'll give it another 5 minutes. And another 5 minutes went by and you didn't feel anything. Didn't feel God's presence. Didn't feel anything happen to you. Didn't feel anything holy. Still felt tired. Still felt depressed. Still felt nothing was happening. And you kept persevering for half an hour. And not a single thought came to you that was holy. Nothing, no happy feeling, holy feeling came about. How would you grade that prayer on a 1 to 10? You'd probably grade it as a big 0. And you'd be wrong. Let's go to another example. You go the next day to church and you're going to pray. And you intend to pray half an hour this time. And after 2 minutes, you're overwhelmed with a feeling of the presence of God. And you look at your watch and you've been there an hour. And it felt like 2 minutes. And you're so feeling of God's presence, you're so overwhelmed with feelings there that you cry. How would you grade that prayer? That would be a 10, right? Wrong. You see, when you pray and you feel nothing, that's your gift to God. But when you pray and feel something, that's God's gift to you. See, when you feel something, you didn't make that feeling happen. That feeling has nothing to do with you. But when you prayed and felt nothing, you had to make a decision. You said, I'm not feeling anything here. I don't feel like God is here. I don't feel His presence. But I had decided to persevere. I decided to keep looking at my watch. Well, I'll give it another 5 minutes. And each time you did that, you decided to carry on. That was love. But when you were in church for an hour, it meant to be there for half an hour, and it felt like a minute, because you felt something, that didn't involve any decision. That was feeling. You see, and usually we think feeling is love. When you felt the love of God, when you felt God's presence, when you felt the tears. So, oh, now I'm in love with God. Now I can feel God. Now I know what it means to love God. And that's not what we mean by loving God. Anybody would pray if they felt that. Now, if that's true of prayer and God, it's also true of people. Now, who wouldn't love someone if they had feelings for them? Pagans would, wouldn't they? Even an atheist would go around loving someone who made them feel good, and they felt romantic feelings. They felt their heart was beating, and they felt, wow, this is love. Even atheists feel that. But you see, that doesn't involve a decision, that's feelings. And that's not what marriage is all about. See, most young kids, when they're starting to get married, have that feeling. It's infatuation. And you feel this guy, look at this guy, he's so good looking, and he's got blonde hair and blue eyes, and he looks like Tarzan or Superman. And boy, your heart beats 1,000 a minute. And you look at this girl, and she looks like some model, and she's got a beautiful body, and she's laid out well, and oh boy, she's gorgeous. She's got red hair, or she's a blonde or a brunette, and the gorgeous blue eyes, or beautiful big brown eyes. And every time you see her, your heart beats. You say, I'm in love. That's not love. That's infatuation. Probably the person you fall in love with when you first met, you didn't even like each other. Think about it. Many people have gotten married to someone, they couldn't even stand him when they first met him. She thought he was stuck up. She thought he was a show-off. She thought he was too quiet. She thought he was too studious, or he was too macho. He thought she was a show-off, or she was too smart for him. And then one night, suddenly they started talking, they started getting to know each other, and little by little, they started to relate to each other. And they started growing closer to each other. And then one night he said to himself, I love her. You know, when he said that, he made a decision. And he said to her, I love you. And she thought, hey, I love him too. And she said back, and I love you too. They both made a decision to love one another. You know, maybe 3 or 4 weeks later, they got into a fight. He wanted to go to a movie and she didn't, or he wanted to go to the ball game and she didn't. She wanted to stay home and he didn't. Something her mother said, or something his mother said, or 1 in 1,001 things could have happened, and they got into a fight. And he was angry with her, and she was angry with him. And he decided that moment not to love her. Even if it only lasted half an hour, it was a decision made. They didn't talk to each other, they maybe never even called on, saw each other. And so they made a decision not to love each other, even dating. Now that doesn't happen too much when you're dating, but it happens an awful lot when you're married. See, when you're dating, because there's a romance to the whole thing, and you see each other in kind of a positive light, you're more likely to forgive each other. You're more likely to get over those arguments much more quickly. But when you're married, they can go on for days. It can go on for weeks. It could go on for years. What happens when people get married and make that decision not to love? Something about him annoys her. Maybe he sleeps in the chair when she wants to talk. Maybe he's running around the house with his shorts on because he wants to relax. Maybe she's still got her curlers in. Maybe the house is dirty. His dinner isn't cooked, or it's cooked too much. Maybe he was late for dinner. And little by little, these daily things get on each other's nerves. And one day, she's had it up to here. She starts telling herself, I don't love him anymore. And then she said, I don't love him. She made a decision. And they go on living with each other, day after day, putting up with each other, but mentally saying to each other, I don't love him, I don't love her, but we're married and we've got to stick it out. See, is that what marriage is all about? Marriage is a decision too. See, love is a decision, not a feeling. Now, I should make a distinction here. I'm not saying thoughts are not sins. They are. I can sin with a thought. Thoughts do have morality. Judgments are thoughts, aren't they? Not feelings. But in American, we confuse the word feeling with thoughts. What I'd like you to do now in the lesson would be to write down on your notebook a sentence describing a feeling. Write down a sentence right now, I feel, and then complete the sentence. Something you're going to say to your loved one, what you feel. Husbands and wives will probably goof it up worse than lovers. A wife might say to her husband, I feel you should spend more time with the kids. He said, I feel you should clean the house up. Are those feelings? No, they're thoughts. When you can replace the word feel with the word think, and it still makes sense, that's not a feeling, that's a thought. Let's go to those sentences we mentioned. I feel that you should keep the house clean. I think that you should keep the house clean. You said feel, but the word there should be think. See, I can take the word feel out, replace it with think, and it still makes sense. So even though I'm saying I'm sharing my feelings, I'm not. I'm sharing my thoughts. I feel that you should spend more time with the kids. Very common thing a wife would say to her husband. That's not a feeling, that's a thought. I think that you should spend more time with the kids. So whenever the word feel is followed by that, whenever the word feel is followed by that, that is not a feeling, that's a thought. And you see, feelings don't have morality, but thoughts do. I can make mistakes and sin with thoughts. I can't help my feelings. I can help my thoughts. I can't think myself warm. I can't think myself cold. I can't think myself not depressed. I either feel it or I don't. So, just because I say feel doesn't mean it's a feeling. Whenever I can replace it with the word think, it's not a feeling, it's a thought. Whenever the word feel is followed by that, it's not a feeling, it's a thought. Now, a pretty infallible way of judging a feeling is you can replace it with the verb to be. How do you feel? I feel tired. I am tired. How do you feel? I feel confused. I am confused. How do you feel? I feel depressed. I am depressed. How do you feel? I feel thirsty. I am thirsty. How do you feel? I feel angry. I am angry. How do you feel? I feel sexy. I'm sexy. That's a feeling. Now, I can't help what I feel. So young lovers, as you want to grow in love, this especially applies more to married people, because they stop doing it. Young lovers are more likely to do it. Young lovers will share their feelings. A young boy will say to his young girl, how do you feel tonight, dear? I feel tired. Tell me about it. And she tries to describe why she feels tired. He tries to empathize with her and feels tired with her. He doesn't say you've got no right to feel tired. What have you been doing all day? But a wife who's been married 20 years to a husband, the husband comes home and says, how do you feel, dear? She says, I feel tired. What do you mean you feel tired? What have you been doing all day? Watching soap operas? He stopped empathizing. He stopped listening to her. She's trying to share her feelings. Maybe she says to him, how do you feel, Dave? How was your day, dear? It was rotten. And he starts to proceed to share how he feels. Maybe he feels depressed. So what have you got to feel depressed about? You just got a promotion. So what? He feels depressed. He doesn't have to have a reason to feel depressed. Most people don't have a reason. They have no idea in the world why they feel depressed. They don't have to have a reason. But if we stopped and listened to each other, we would understand how that person feels. Because how that person feels is who they are. That's why it's the verb to be. You know, I could even do that with the scriptures. Look at me with Jesus. Somebody once said to me, it never says how Jesus feels in the Bible. Well, it does. He doesn't have to use the word feel. It's the verb to be. On the way, he came to a Samaritan town called Sychar. I'm reading from the 4th chapter of John, starting at verse 5. Near the land that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Jacob's well is there, and Jesus, tired by the journey, stopped there. How do you feel, Jesus? I feel tired. You mean you feel tired like I do, Jesus? I felt more tired than you. I'm pooped. I walked up a mountain. Hot day. I had sandals on. Doing the old stuffy road. He feels absolutely whacked. Worn out. And he plops down by a well. He's exhausted. How do you feel, Jesus? I feel tired. He sat down by the well. It was about the 6th hour, when a Samaritan woman came up to draw some water. Jesus said to her, give me a drink. How do you feel, Jesus? I feel thirsty. You mean, Jesus, you felt thirsty? Boy, my throat was parched. There was that ice-cold, clear water from that well. Then we go on with the story. The Samaritan woman said to him, what, you, a Jew, asked me, a Samaritan, for a drink? What was her feelings? There were feelings of religious prejudice here. Perhaps even racial prejudice. Perhaps in our modern times, what, you, a Catholic, asking me, a Baptist, for a drink? You, a white man, asking me, a black lady, for a drink? What kind of feelings would that be if someone said that to you? Put yourself in that situation. You're sitting down by the well. You ask some black lady for a drink. She said, hey, whitey, how come you're asking me for a drink? Or you're in a Baptist town and you're a Roman Catholic. How come you're a Catholic and you're asking us Baptists for a drink? What feelings being expressed there? See, she's sharing feelings. So did Jesus. How did Jesus feel when she gave him that prejudicial answer? He said, if you knew who I was, you'd be asking me for a drink. What was Jesus' feelings? Was it anger? No, he was still compassionate, still soft. And then she goes on to ask him about where they should worship. But prior to that, he'd asked her to bring her husband, didn't he? She said, I have no husband, sir. He says, you're quite right. You've had 6. And the man you're living with is not your husband. And then, rather than face the question, the problem in her life, what does she do? She starts talking theology. She wants to know who's got the right religion. Where should we worship? See, even when we read the scriptures, we can read a deeper level and understand the person better if I go beyond the words to see the feelings that are involved. But you see, now that we know what feelings are, we see they're valuable. Oh, they're not saying they're not valuable, they're very valuable. They're essential to know who that person is. I must know about feelings. I must be able to get in contact with my feelings. And I must be able to share my feelings, and you must be able to receive my feelings if you want to know me. This is true in any relationship between people. But it's absolutely essential between those who intend to marry. And it's very essential for a marriage to last. Married people that don't share feelings are not really married. They're just living together. And so we're not talking about feelings, though, when it comes to love. Love is not a feeling. Love is a decision. And so when you first said to her, I love you, or maybe feelings came of love at some time, but it wasn't the feelings that made you love her, it's the words that made you decide with your mind, with your thoughts. You said, with your mind, I love you. She responded with her mind, with her thoughts, with her words, I love you. That from both of you involved a decision. You decided to love one another. Then you decided to get engaged. Maybe that's why you're listening to this program. Because you're now coming to a priest to prepare for marriage, because you are engaged. You bought her a ring. She put it on her finger. The day you went to the jewelers and picked that ring out, you made a decision to love her. The day she took that ring from you and put it on her finger, she made a decision to love you. You know, and sometimes, maybe you've already happened to you, that after you put that ring on your finger, you've had a fight and taken it off. Take your ring back. You decided not to love him that day. He decided not to love you. But that 2 or 3 days went by, and the feelings came back, or the thoughts came back, and you realized you couldn't live without each other. And again, you decided to love each other again. So you called her up and made a date again, and she put the ring back on again. And so you're engaged again. So you made a decision again to love one another. But you see, what you're preparing for is marriage. And marriage is not like being engaged. It's not, well, the days I don't love you, I take the ring off, and maybe 2 or 3 days later you can put it back on. You know, I'm only going to love you certain days of the week. I'm only going to love you when I feel the love. I'm only going to love you when you're doing what I want. I'm only going to love you when I can relate to you. You're going to have to relate to her in good times and bad, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and health, until death do you part. Because love is not a feeling, it's a decision. So you approach the priest. Say, Father, we want to get married. So you prepare, and you are preparing now for marriage. So what are you preparing to do? You're preparing to go in front of a congregation of friends, neighbors, fellow church people, in the house of God, before the minister of God, in the presence of God, and in the name of God, make vows. That's more than saying, will you go out with me? That's more than saying, will you wear my engagement ring? You're saying, I take this woman exclusively from all others, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part. But you see, you can't go on after you've made those vows living like you were engaged. It's a permanent commitment. Not just when you feel like it. It's got to be there when you don't feel like it. And so each time you do something, you're deciding to love him. So the wedding vows have been said, you consummate the marriage, you come back from the honeymoon, you don't feel like getting up to cook his breakfast, but you do. You decided to love him. He doesn't feel like eating your breakfast, but he does. And he decided to love you. You don't feel like washing the clothes. You don't feel like making the beds. You don't feel like cleaning the house up, but you do. You decided to love him. He doesn't feel like giving you his pay packet or his paycheck, but he does. He's decided to love you. You've been cooped up in the house all week. You want to go out for dinner, and he doesn't. He said, I don't feel like going out, but you do. He takes you out anyway. He decided to love you. See, it's not the things that you feel like doing in marriage that make love. 80% of the time in marriage, you're going to have to do things you don't feel like. You're not going to feel like washing clothes every day of your life. You're not going to feel like doing housework every day of your life. You're not going to feel like shopping every day of your life. You're not going to feel like listening every day of your life. If you're only going to do what you feel like, you're not going to have a very successful marriage. You're going to start having to make decisions. Decisions that go against your feelings. And you're going to have to remember then that love is not a feeling. Love is a decision. A decision day after day of your life. To be continually made forever. And that takes an awful lot of maturity. And that's why the church makes it hard for you to get married now. You know, there was a time years back when you could go to a priest and say, I want to get married next week. And the priest would say, you're baptized, and bring your baptismal certificate, or bring your confirmation, and where was she baptized, and where was he baptized, and you picked out the date where you want to be married, you got the flowers, you got the bridesmaids and the bridegroom, and all you had to do was turn up at church. Well, those days have gone. Most dioceses now in the United States require 6 months preparation for marriage. That's why these tapes have been made, as part of that preparation. You think, well, why is the church making it so hard? Because a lot of teenagers today are immature. They say, we feel like living together forever. We feel like being married. But what if we don't feel like it next week? See, immature people follow their feelings. People that are mature know how to control their feelings. People that are mature can say, I don't feel like it, but I will. I don't feel like it, but I did. That's decision. And only mature people can continually make mature decisions. So many young people, you see, are immature. That doesn't mean to say you're bad. It means you haven't grown up yet. And so the church wants to make sure that you're mature enough to know what you're doing. Mature enough to make those decisions. Not for a day, for a week, a month, or a year, but forever. For better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and health, until death do us part. Marriage is forever. Love is a decision.